Pretty frequently, I find myself in need of clean, modern, kind of digital UI type sounds. Usually it's to serve as a palette starting point, like you could have more mechanical or physical elements, or maybe double down on the bleepy tech elements to fit the aesthetic better that you're going for. But in any case, I want to share my approach for assembling some generic kind of basic building blocks. Taking a look at our shopping list here, we need to start with some impulses. So I'm going to be looking for kick, impacty, transient kind of sounds, maybe with some slight zaps thrown in. So I'm going to be using kick 3 in this case. And I figure I'm just going to let the record buffer go and we'll see what we get. And then I'll probably scrub through in post to just show you the most interesting parts. But this is pretty much the default patch. It sounds like this. I'm just going to tweak until I get a good variety of these kinds of sounds. I think that's enough of that. Go ahead and strike that through. Next, we're going to work on some trills. So I've already got a basic patch stood up over here that we're going to be working off of. And it's this, I've done a little video on this that I'll link right now, but it's basically like the Galactic Assistant max patch recreated in Faceplant. It goes like this. Well, I've already tweaked it a little bit. But yeah, this is going to be the basis. And I'm just going to fool around and do a similar record buffer thing. And then I'll stop on the good bits as I walk through it. So like the main things that you saw me tweaking here, I'm changing some of the inter-oscillator modulation, so like the shift, harmonic, and usually don't do phase so much, but that's basically like, it's not FM because it's not frequency modulation, but it's, you know, routing the oscillators to each other. Make some cool textures and also changing the frequency shift, ring mod amount, rate of the scrolling LFO, and the envelope shape to either give us more sustained scrolling textures with sustain 100%. You can just hold down the key and it'll keep going, or bring it down and just use the decay to make shorter little clicks and bleeps. But that's enough of that. We're going to be moving on to the next thing. Disable those. Take a look up here. We got, where did our little list go? We got telemetry. Cross this out just to keep us on track. Also gonna stop the recording and start a new one. And call this telemetry. Oops. You'll also note in the record buffer settings, I have it don't save below 60 dB for 2000 milliseconds. This basically makes it so that at moments when I'm talking like this and there's nothing actually coming in the output of Reaper, it's not actually printing that. So it helps the jam files be a little bit more manageable, I find. Anyways, got another patch to look into. Sounds like sort of like this by default. What we got going on here, this was before I actually figured out the previous patch that I showed you. This was my attempt at creating a Galactic Assistant type thing. It was taking the wrong approach, but it's basically got 3 oscillators that are FMing each other. And then I made a macro knob to turn up the FM depth. And then we have a very fast random LFO that's controlling the harmonics of the modulators. Here you can see. Actually, no, sorry. That's just controlling the master pitch. So if we like disable this, it's just essentially a bunch of waves with amplitude modulation, as you can see by this LFO. Then once you enable the random, it turns up the global pitch variation. Kind of classic droid type sounds. Anyways, I'm going to mess around with this a bit and we'll see what we get. I find that disperser in this case sort of smooths out the clickiness of it to create more almost rounded peaks. You can see I have one going before the chorus. And by the way, the chorus is just adding some stereo width because most of this is just mono. And yeah, as always, frequency shifters are really good for this kind of stuff. On to the next, we got more bleepy garbage. Let's take a look at the next patch that we're going to be using. Goes like this. It's kind of a toss-up every time you hit the trigger. I think there's some randomization going on here that's affecting wavetable and the rate of an LFO. And this LFO is modulating the shift of these two oscillators, which are in turn modulating it's doing FM. It's modulating the frequency of the primary oscillator. We got limiter, disperser like last time, and high pass filter just to cut out some of the crud. But yeah, I'm gonna, once again, hit the record button. Gonna call this one Bleepies and let it rip. Yeah, some of these can get kind of shrill, so I'll probably end up putting soothe on these. And I'll do that in post so you don't have to hear how actually shrill these ones are. But yeah, some of that can be useful. But we don't need too much of it. So I'm going to stop the recording and then going to move on to our next. We got clicks. You always need some kind of click. The way that I'm generating these is going to be a little bit interesting. So I'm using this synth called Mace, which if I turn off the additional processing, it's like some kind of AI generated thing. And no knocks to the people behind it, but I think they called them things like cyber symbols, cyber rides, and like cyber vocals to account for the fact that most of the sounds that come out from this sound like really distorted and noisy. And yeah, I'll just let you listen. And you can drop new things, and so I'm like interested in, let's say, metal Foley sounds that it generates. You can drop it in and trigger it, and then generate new ones. On their own, they don't really sound like much. They've got maybe nice tactile transients to them, but what I'm really interested in is processing them a little bit. So we're going to bring up the volume, put soothe on it, and then I'm going to alternate between doing declick, and I'm just going to put uber loud at the end to bring the volume back up. But this is declick output clicks only, which is pretty cool, and also decrackle, which is similar but also different, output crackle only. So I'm just going to fool around with these. So those are pretty cool. What you saw me do at the end there is I added a transient shaper, just speed set to very fast and attack down. The opposite of what I usually use transient shapers for, I know. But it was getting kind of harsh, and I just wanted to take down some of those really spiky peaks. We want some of it, but not all of it. So I think that's good to just have some variety in there. With that out of the way, just keeping track here. We're going to move on to the squidge, which is, I know, what you've all been waiting for. So let's take a listen to it and see how this is going to go. So what I've got going on here is a pretty simple vital patch. If we turn off the oscillator 1, we can hear it's just this oscillator 2 with 2 voices, the smear effect going on. And what we're doing is we have a FM from oscillator 1 that we can toy around with. I'm probably only going to use like a little bit of that knob. Now I just have a high pass filter because we're really only interested in that like crispy top end. And also just a touch of flanging happening. What I'll probably toy with at some point as well is I have GRM shift going on to smooth out the clickiness a bit. Make it a little bit noisier almost. A little more comb resonate-y, sort of cricket-like. So yeah, that's sort of what we're working with. And let's get that record going. So it's pretty cool. You can see what I'm doing here is I'm using shift to perform little gestures that convey pitch without having a clear pitch, which is something that's useful for, stuff like opens, closes, cancels, accepts, these sort of things that you want to have a kind of tonality, but maybe you don't want to read as having a specific tone. Kind of talking around the fact, but it's like, this won't clash with music, and it almost sounds like filter sweeps with like resonant peaks as opposed to specific notes on a keyboard. So let's kill that recording. I think that's enough of that. And we're going to move on to our last thing here, which is going to be some swooshes. Going to employ some of the similar plugins that you were looking at before, but this time, oops, let's turn off the input. Instead of using a synth, we're going to be running some samples into here. So showed you my last video, but this is some of the source from Paul's library, the magic element one. We just got some whooshes. It's a sparkler whoosh, ignite, crackle, looks like. We're interested in wideband frequency content and just the overall shape of a whoosh here. You can throw pretty much anything to this, but the main parts of the chain, I'll just run a little breakdown for you to show you how it sounds as we go through it. But we're starting with reverb, which is something I seldom use, but this is to create more of a tail that we're then going to modulate later on. So this is how it goes. As always, Z noise does not like it when I run at 48 kilohertz, but I have to run at 48 kilohertz for OBS to not freak out. It's a whole deal. But yeah, I'm going to do this one offline. Now that we've got all our raw source bounces, at this point it's time to shape the palette a little bit more by curating. So we're going to take the one shots we like and toss the ones we don't. The selects will then get thrown into a sampler. So while this step seems kind of tedious, it's going to pay off in the long run by making our sampler combinations a lot more usable right out of the gate. And with the power of movie magic, that arduous task is done in record time. Okay, so for the next step, we want to take all of these one-shots and export them so that we can then load it up into a sampler. So to do that, I'm going to select them all and then open the file batch item converter and add them, select immediate items. And we're just going to bounce it to the bounces subdirectory. Normally I'd put it in a folder underneath that, but this is fine. Those file names fine, stereo. We're going to normalize it to -7 because some of these can get a little bit shrill if they're too loud. I'm going to put soothe on it later, but this will just help, I think. And yeah, let's go ahead and convert. 289 items processed. That's more than we need. But yeah, I have a track template already made for S layer that has like all of the samples unloaded, the default patch. I'll show you more about how I'm going to set up the S layer patch later. But yeah, basically we want to load all that stuff up. So let's go ahead, mute this. We need to look at that. Do you want to look at this? find our folder that we bounced all the shit into, and S layer can hold 127 samples. There might be a way to do more than that, I forget, but I'm just going to do that. So I'm going to randomly select 127. I'll speed up this bit. And then what I'm going to do is make sure in S layer, we're all the way over there. Just going to drag them in, and you put them down here. This loaded up all of our samples for us. So as I alluded to before, this is probably going to be pretty harsh. I'm anticipating that. So I'm going to go ahead and put soothe on here. We just want to be affecting the high end. Probably get pretty in there. And yeah, we'll keep an eye on the limiter. I don't want these getting too loud, and we might need to reduce the output volume to compensate. Yeah, what I'll usually do is, the way I like to use S layer is I will mute half of the layers that we have. And because I think if you have too much going on, it can get a little bit too busy really easily. We're going to keep the grain off for now, and then the envelope sort of like this, so that we can get some sustains with hard attacks. We can do soft attacks later. If I was not recording for YouTube, I would set the sample rate to 96, but because I can't do that and record at the same time, it's at 48. But yeah, then I'll hit this random button to get some variations that we like. We can pitch this down actually a little bit. So we'll go like, let's say down 8 steps, up an octave. And yeah, maybe give a little bit more variance there. Yeah, let's have a listen. Let's see what that sounds like. I don't like that one. So I'll just keep cycling through until I find one that I like. Sure, maybe that's got something to it. I'm just going to start a record buffer. Actually, no, I'm not going to start a record buffer. I'm going to use NVK create here. So that's a variation I like. And I'm just going to undo this and then randomize everything else to get some more variations. Great. Then I'll drag them in. And I'm just going to repeat this a bunch until I get a lot of stuff that I enjoy. So on to the next variation, we'll turn on the randomizer and proceed. And let's just say we're happy with what we got there. What I then usually move on to is messing with the grain. So I'd, you could turn it on for all of them if you wanted, but I'm just going to randomize which ones get grained, and then, yeah, let the stretch and everything be randomized as well. So let's go ahead and play some more. And this time they're going to be like grain variations. So let's go ahead and repeat the same process, this time with some grain smearing going on. Now, those sounds on their own might be pretty useful, but I wouldn't say any of this is particularly groundbreaking or inspired. It's just, yeah, sometimes you need a lot of this kind of crap. And you could stop there and use it as a palette. I'm just going to go ahead and slap some plugin chains on top, as I do, to spice it up a bit more before we get to our designs. So I've just gone ahead and taken some choice bits from those more designed bounces you just heard, combined with some of the less designed ones, the outputs from S-Layer, and designed some sample assets just to show how a palette like this might be used in practice to design stuff that'd be suitable for whatever your context, game, mockup, whatever. And yeah, I'll just let this play out.